diving into Unit 6 today. So let's jump into that. Let's dive right into Note 6.1. It's going to start off, we're going to look at what's called the relational prefix, ya. It's ya if it's in front of a consonant, or just the ya sound in front of a vowel. But basically, this is the Amharic possessor. It translates to the English word of, and it always precedes as a prefix the possessed, or as a word, the possessed item. So, as an example here, the American embassy literally translates to the embassy of America. So, ya American is of America, and then embassy is the embassy. So, it's the embassy that belongs to or of America. So, the possessor always precedes that which is possessed. And if the possessor is modified, has an adjective, then the prefix is going to move back to the modifier. And the example that they have here in the text is this sentence here at the bottom of page 59, where it says, Yakonjo Seitbeit. So if it was just Yaseitbeit, then that would be the house of a girl. But because it has that modifier there of gonjo, which means pretty or beautiful, the prefix moves back to gonjo. So ya gonjo seitbeit. So it's the house of the girl who's pretty, if you want to look at it literally, but it's the pretty girl's house, or the house, or a pretty girl's house, or a house of a pretty girl. Same thing with that next sentence. Yatoro Tamari Misaf, right? The book of the student, but the book of the good student, or a book. Yeah, the book of a good student. So a good student's book is how you'd read that. So again, it's just moving back to the modifier if there's a modifier there. If it wasn't there, it would just be Yatamari Misaf, the student's book. If there's multiple modifiers, sometimes you can have multiple adjectives, and it's going to go on the first one. And sometimes, in some cases, though, it can be added to each one, especially if it's separated by the ana construction, the suffix that goes on at the end of a word. So if we look here at this second paragraph, where you have yakonjoana, yastoayoa, tamari abatmata, it's the pretty and intelligent student that it's referring to. So it has two adjectives there, and you have the prefix on both adjectives, and you have the na suffix construction there between those two. So just kind of building on that, remember the ya goes on the possessor. If there's a modifier, it goes on the modifier. If there's multiple modifiers, it will go on the first one, or in some cases, it will go on each modifier. And a couple things to remember, that is, it doesn't come after any prepositions. So you're not going to see it with other preposition prefixes. And sometimes you can, it'll use it without even the ya, and the word order just implies the possession. So in this section here at the top of the screen, what a tamari beit heda, right there. There you don't have a prefix, but because you have tamariu beit, that order there shows that the house belongs to the student. So you're going, so heda is he went, wada is that preposition towards the house, and because it's tamariu beit, it's the student's house. So he went to the student's house, and so that word order just implies the possession there, even though there isn't the prefix there. And I think the last point I wanted to emphasize is just that it can also be affixed to independent pronouns. So we see here in the table with these multiple columns, there's a couple ways that you can do it. You can have the suffix added to the word masaf, or you can have ya added to the independent pronouns, ane, anta, anchi, I, me, you, or I, you, male, you, female, he, she, etc., etc. And you get, instead of ene, you'll have yene, yesu, yinya, etc., etc. So it can be applied, it can be affixed to those personal pronouns, and it just emphasizes the possession. And that's it for the relational prefix. Now let's look at 6.2. This looks at the infinitive form of the verb. So we've seen a little bit with verbs and how they're conjugated. And now we're looking at the infinitive, of course, is just the unconjugated form of the verb. And what you'll know that you're looking at an infinitive because it usually starts with that prefix m or ma. So matrat, to call, mehed, to go, mayat, to see, etc., etc. That's usually the indicator of infinitive. They can take prefixes and suffixes, and we'll see that in coming units, but just know that that's what it looks like. Now let's look at 6.3. This is another verb form. It's called the imperfective. It refers to the present and the future, although the way, in my experience, it seems most Amharic speakers think of it is as primarily future, but secondarily present. So it can mean an ongoing action in the present, but it seems like for the most part, usually people first think of an ongoing action in the future, something that you're going to do. So there's two parts to it. There's the short imperfective from Unit 9, which we'll see later. And then there is and it's basically the stem here, the falig part, if we're looking at this chart. And then the second part is the suffix, which is a form of Allah. And what you'll see, with the exception of I believe is with the exception of the first person. No, excuse me. With the exception of the third person singular masculine, they all are, as you can see here, where it just shows you the form. Alu, Allah, Alish, Alich, Alin, Alachu, Alu. Those are basically the forms of Allah. So I guess if you want to think about it this way, it's kind of the way I think of it is you got the stem of a verb like falig, to want, and you have a suffix that's a form of Allah, which is I am, or I am present. And so it's like I am present wanting, or you are present wanting, or you are being wanting. I'm not sure if people think about it to that level, but given the way these two words came together, gives you maybe some insight into how to think about how it means. But it refers to an action going on in the future, and that's the construction there. You'll also see the prefixes here. You'll want to remember that because that also gives you a sign of if it's first, second, or third person, and whether it's singular or plural. But that covers 6.3. Now, 6.4 gets into, excuse me, verb classification. And what this is going to refer to is the way vowels are distributed between the different forms. So it anchors off of the third person masculine singular form. So in the examples that they have here, nagara, falaga, that's the third person masculine singular. And what it's referring to here is even though these are what they call three radical verbs, referring to the fact that there are three syllables, if you will, or three characters in Amharic if you were to see it written out. And so nagara, falaga, that's the three radicals. But when you look at their infinitive forms, mangar, mafalag, or their imperfective forms, yinagral, yifalagal, you see that there's difference in terms of how they're constructed, right? And that's the distinction between type A and type B. It just refers to the different ways that the vowels and the consonants are distributed. So you'll see that also in the chart a couple pages back. You can go through all the different verbs and how they differ. So it runs through the three radicals first and shows you what the vowel distributions look like. So you can always treat this template as kind of a reference to come back to. And as you deal more and more with verbs and continue to read through the units, you can always come back here and see how, if you know the type and the third person masculine singular, then you should be able to construct the infinitive and the imperfective based on that on your own. So then in the next subpart, it takes you through the two radical verbs. So sara, dada as two examples. Again, if you look at the infinitive on the left column, masrat, matatat, or the imperfective, yisaral, yidatal, you can see the distinction between type A and type B in terms of how the vowels are distributed. So that's just what that's referring to there. Note 6.5 just builds on that, and it shows you that going forward, the format of how they lay out the kind of lexicon or dictionary entries for verbs. And it's going to start with the third person masculine singular, then the infinitive, then the third person masculine imperfective. So these are kind of your anchor forms. And this is also done in Hebrew as well. And where the third person masculine singular is kind of your anchor form from which you go from there to all of the other forms. Note 6.6 refers to the postposition, gar, gara. And when it's used with the prefix ka, it just means with. So kamangar, with whom, in that first sentence, kataro kamangarno, with whom is the appointment. Or kawich gudai ministrugar, no. So it's with the foreign ministry. Whenever you see that ka and then gar, that construction, kabaragar, kanegar, Karsugar, as you can see at the bottom of that paragraph, that just put together means with. And you don't have to have the postposition gar. It can be there or not. It's kind of optional. But if you see that there, that's definitely we'll let you know that it means with. Finally, note 6.7. It's another similar kind of construction. Again, you have ka with as a prefix, and then you have the postposition bafit or bahwala, before or after. So this construction, ka bafit, is before kamehedu bafit, before I have, or before he leaves, kazia bohala, after that. Izia is that, I think we'll see this in a later unit. It's a demonstrative pronoun. So that kabafit, kabohala, it's going to be basically just means before and after. Kasat bafit, morning, kasat bohala in the afternoon. Those are good phrases to know that you'll probably hear frequently. But we round it out with that construction, and then that finishes out the unit. And that finishes out Unit 6. Next up will be Unit 7, where we'll look at verb suffix pronouns with the imperfective, among other things. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you in the next lesson.